Would you like to learn how to make your own sourdough starter? Have you tried to make a sourdough starter and never been successful with it? Well, I'm going to show you from start to finish how to get a nice, bubbly, active starter ready to make a loaf of sourdough. First of all, we're going to start with a jar, and preferably you want a jar that doesn't have a fixed lid. You also do want a set of scales, and we have a flour. I've chosen a strong white bread flour, but you can choose a flour of your choice, and then filtered water. If you don't have access to filtered water, you can use cool boiled water, bottled water, but basically you want to be avoiding using tap water if it has a high level of chlorine in it. First of all, we're actually going to create the starter. So you want to know how much your jar weighs, and you want to keep a record of this so that you don't have to empty the jar fully each time. I'm now going to add into that 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. The starter will take about a week to 2 weeks to become ready, and I'm going to show you step by step how we get to that point. First of all, it's just creating the starter. At the moment, it's going to look like a lot of nothing. Nothing's going to be happening, especially in the first few days. But this is the time that we create that starter by adding 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour. So we've got the two together, and then using a spatula, we're going to mix it all up, and that is your starter now created. It is not ready for baking. We have begun the journey of making your very own sourdough starter. We're now back for day 2 of making a sourdough starter. So I've left it for 24 hours, and I can actually see that there's somewhat of an activity going on in there. It just looks like the flour and water are sort of doing something together. So I'm going to discard half of what's in here. I want to keep 50 grams basically. So if we get rid of 50 grams of the starter, it will leave me with 50 grams behind. So I know that my jar weighs 410 grams, and so I want to leave in there 50, so my jar now needs to weigh 460 with the starter still in it. The reason why we discard is because when we feed the starter, we need to feed it with either the same or more. So of course, if I left it the same there, then I'd have 100 grams of starter, then I'd have to feed it with 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water. Then that would mean I'd have lots for tomorrow, and then tomorrow I'd have 300, and I'd have to feed it with 300 grams of water and 300 grams of flour, and then I'd need to get a different jar. And then the next day I'd have 900, I'd have to feed it with 900 grams of flour and 900 grams of water, and we would carry on like that, and then I'd have lots of starter. So to keep it manageable and small, and especially at this point where we're actually just trying to create an active starter, we want to keep it as small as possible. So the fact that we need to feed it at a minimum of a 1:1:1 ratio, I need to feed it with either the same or more. So the same is 1:1, and the 1:1:1 means that whatever the 1 is what I feed it with. So 1 becomes 50, so I feed it with 50 and 50. So then if the 1 was 100, I would feed it with 100 and 100. So you never ever feed with less than what you start with. So I now know that I've got 50 grams of starter in there, so I want to put in 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. I'm going to stir it up, leave it on the side for one day, and then feed it again tomorrow. The recommendation is that even if it starts bubbling, we don't start baking with it until it is a week old, because we want to make sure that the bacteria and things that are growing in there to create the starter are nice and mature, and that they don't end up giving us some kind of a bellyache or something. It's all mixed up. Be interesting to come back tomorrow to see where we're at, see if we've got any activity, got any bubbles, and I shall guide you through up until when we get our final starter that is then ready for baking. We are back for day 3 of creating a sourdough starter. It's been left on the side for 24 hours, and I can see that things are starting to happen, which is also very exciting. So it smells very strong. It's definitely got that sort of like alcohol smell to it now, and although it's very thin, it's very, very bubbly. It definitely looks like and smells like something's happening. So we need to feed it, and we need to feed it in the same way that we did yesterday. So I know that my jar weighs 410 grams, and I want to leave 50 in there. So once I've removed some, which is discard, I then want to be left with 460 grams. There we go. And then zero it out, put in 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour. Then I'm going to stir it up, and then that's it. Come back in 24 hours time to feed it again. We're back for day 4 of feeding a sourdough starter, and as you can see, inside there we have actually got some bubbles that are starting to form and a slight layer of like a hooch on the top, which is the liquid that starts to appear when your starter is hungry. So that's showing me that we've actually got some activity going on there. Again, it smells kind of like, I don't know, that sort of alcohol smell. So it's giving me signs that we're getting somewhere. Now, if this was a fully activated starter, after 24 hours, it wouldn't be active and it would be hungry anyway. So I feel like we're at the right point with this. So I'm going to weigh it. And as we know, my jar is 410 grams. So in order to feed it, we want it to weigh 460 grams. So I'm just going to discard some. At this stage, we do want to be discarding it, not keeping it. There we go, 460. And then I'm going to be putting in 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of filtered water. There we go. So I'm going to stir it all up. There it is. That's the starter fed. And then I'll come back in 24 hours to feed it again and see where we're at. We're now 12 hours later, and as you can see, it's got so many bubbles in there, but I am going to compare it to my other starter that I've been using for the past year. And as you can see, they are quite different. They were both fed at the same time last night, and I can already see without stirring it that this is probably going to be a little bit thinner. But as you can see, the bubbles really are starting to form in there, and the smell lets me know that the starter really is starting to do something now, which is really good. It's got that alcohol smell to it, but I'll just show you the comparison of this starter, and this one is after a 12-hour feed as well. You can just see that the bubbles are just a little bit more sort of prominent, and the starter itself is just that much thicker. They've both been fed exactly the same, and this is what we're hoping from this starter. So again, I'll feed it today and just another couple of days, and we'll be a week in, and I'm hoping that we can bake a loaf with this at some point this week and see how it turns out. We're back for day 5 of feeding the sourdough starter, and as you can see, there's lots of lovely bubbles in there. Now, it has been 24 hours since it's been fed, and even if you had an active starter, after 24 hours, it would still need to be fed and would probably look not too dissimilar to this. So if you are seeing this at this point, this is a good sign, and don't get disheartened. So I'm going to feed it now, and then we're going to leave it 12 hours and have a really good look at it and see where it's at after 12 hours, because coming up to a week should be about the time that we should be able to start seeing some really good doubling in it. And if not, then we need to start looking at other ways to get this starter going and get it ready for baking some bread. Day 6, feeding it again with the same ratio, leaving 50 grams of starter, 50 grams of flour, and then 50 grams of water. I decided to clean the jar out so that it's really obvious as to whether or not the starter doubles inside, and putting an elastic band around it as well just gives you an indicator of where and when the starter does grow and if it grows, and it's just really helpful, so you might want to try that. It's very exciting to come down this morning and see, after last night's feed, that I've managed to get my starter to double in size. So that's a week in, and we've managed to get the starter to double. I'm going to just do one more feed with this and then get a loaf baked tomorrow using this starter, and let's see how it turns out. I'll just show you what it looks like inside the jar as well, and as you can see, the bubbles in there look absolutely fantastic. Now that is exactly what we want to be seeing from our starter. So this starter is just a week old, and look what I've managed to create. This is 24 hours later after I've fed it, and as you can see, there are markings there from where the starter has doubled in size. So by using a clean jar and putting elastic band around it is really helpful, because you might actually miss the rise if you go out for the day or forget to check on it and things. So there we go, that's a starter that I've created in 7 days. And so come back for part 2 where I'm going to bake a loaf with it.